everyone. My name's Dr. Jane Warren and I'm really excited to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to start by sharing my screen so that we can get started with the PowerPoint, and then I'll explain as we're going through some of the things that we'll be doing this afternoon. Okay. So we're going to start this afternoon. We're looking at how children within your home, your children who are children of determination, or your children who are typically developing, how they can play with each other, and also how you can engage in play with your children as well. I will talk a little bit about the terminology that we're using, but I'd just like to start with a couple of other things. So when we do presentations in Australia, we start our presentations with an acknowledgement to our country. So I would like to just start with that. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm presenting. And where I'm located, that's the Wadi Wadi people of the Dharawal Nation. And I would like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend our thanks to all the elders within our communities. I would also like to just say how grateful we are to the Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority for making this initiative a reality. And this whole workshop series has been a wonderful opportunity for people to gather different knowledge, extend the knowledge that they already have, and maybe think of some things that they might not previously have thought of. So for any of you who have been in other workshops, you'll know that we're going to have approximately 30 minutes where I will do a presentation, and then we're going to have approximately 20 minutes at the end where you're able to ask questions. So what I would like you to do is, if you have questions throughout the presentation, if you could put those questions into the chat space, that will give me the opportunity to read those questions at the end and then answer them. The other thing that you can do is at the time at the end for questions, if you have a question you would like to ask verbally, then you just need to unmute your microphone and you can ask your question then as well. We're going to do things a little bit differently to a couple of my other workshops, if you've been in those, because I had a little bit of an issue with my screen earlier. So I'm going to go through the actual PowerPoint first, and I'll refer you to the handouts. But we're actually going to have a look at the handouts at the end. Now, some of you may have already downloaded those handouts, so you have access to them, but I will show them to you at the end, and then you can have a look at the content of them. So I'll talk through them, but I won't be going in and out of the presentation. So one of the things I'd just like to say before I start talking about what play actually is the terminology around children of determination that you use. And in Australia, we tend to use the terminology children with disabilities. But we don't use that terminology because we think that it's a deficit approach. We use that terminology because we focus on children being first, just as you do with your terminology. So a disability or a learning need of a child comes after the child. It's part of who the child is, but it doesn't define everything about the child. So we tend to avoid terminology in Australia like autistic children or Down syndrome children because we like to talk about the child first. So where possible, we focus on children and the disability being part of who the child is. So if you do hear me use the word disability, please don't be offended by that terminology. It's just the terminology that I'm more used to. You might have read things or heard of speakers from the UK or the US, and they will often use terms more like special needs. So they'll say special needs children or children with special needs. And that's not terminology that I'm particularly familiar with either. But just so you know that if I do move from children of determination, you know that I am referring to children with all sorts of different learning needs. So what we're going to focus on this afternoon is not one specific area of determination. So in a couple of my other workshops, I've focused much more on children who are on the autism spectrum, but this presentation is going to focus on some different areas of determination as well. So I just want to start by talking about what play is. And if we have a look at the words that are on the screen. So we want play to be fun. And if we think about our own leisure time, we select activities for ourselves that are going to be enjoyable, that are going to be interesting to us, that are going to engage us, and are going to give us some kind of internal or intrinsic motivation. So we want to remember when we're thinking about children playing, we need to have all of those elements. So play can't be something that we force upon children, and it can't be something that doesn't bring the children any of those pleasurable kind of feelings. The other thing for children is we want their play to be child focused. So we want it to be about them. And when you have a number of children playing together, you need to take into account the needs of all of the children within that group. So if it is in your home environment, you can make sure that all of these elements occur for all of your children in your family. And if it's with children in your local community, make sure that that is applicable to all children. But remember that every child doesn't play in the same way, and every child shouldn't be expected to play in the same way. So keeping that in mind when you think about the benefits of play and the types of play as I go through them, some of these will be more or less difficult for your different children. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the elements of play. The first thing I want to say around play is that play is a right of children. And the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was in 1989, outlined a number of different rights. And one of those rights is children's right to rest, leisure, recreation, and play appropriate to their age. And there's a whole lot of countries in the world, including yours and mine, that are signatories on the rights of the child. So there's nowhere in this that says if you have a child of determination that this doesn't apply to them. So a child is a child, and we need to remember that play is actually the right of every child. And I understand that sometimes when children do have complex learning needs, that sometimes there's so many appointments to take them to, and there's so many therapy needs, that play is sometimes something that people forget about. But we need to remember that it's a right for every child. So there's some key points about play that I would like to focus on to start with. So children learn through their play. Play is something that is healthy for all children, healthy in terms of physical health, it's healthy in terms of mental health, it's good for our well-being. Play can reduce stress, and if we think about as adults that we choose leisure activities that don't cause us stress, that they help us to move away from some of the stressful things that might be occurring in our life. And while people often don't think about stress as being part of a child's life, it certainly can be. And we want play to be something that relieves stress or, maybe feelings of frustration or anger or unpleasant feelings. We want play to counteract some of those. Play and learning for children go hand in hand. And while children will often learn in other means as well as play, in Australia, we're very focused on young children, particularly children from birth to 5 years of age, learning through play. So we have a very, very play-focused curriculum. But children are learning all the time when they're playing, just like often adults are as well. So play is a really important context for children to learn within. There's a whole lot of developmental benefits of play, and I'm going to talk about those shortly. And these will apply in different levels and different ways for different children. Play and friendship is really important, and play is a really great way of building friendships, and it helps children to learn all sorts of different skills. So play often is more than what we see it as. Play is a vehicle for children's learning. So we need to make sure we make time for play, and we want children to have opportunities to play both inside and outside. Sometimes when children have complex learning needs, it's harder to maybe think about outdoor activities. For example, if your child has significant physical areas of disability that sometimes then people can think of it, they can't play with those things. They don't have to play in the same way with everything as children who don't have those additional needs. And I'm going to show you some examples in this presentation. Play helps children to feel good about themselves because if the play is structured in an appropriate way, then children are getting pleasure out of play, and children are enjoying what they're doing, so it's making them feel good. We need to remember as adults that we have playful instincts as well, and when you're playing with your children, it's really important not to always just be supervising play, that you're actually engaged in play with your children, and sometimes that can help us to remember what our playful instincts are. So there's a lot to learn about play, and the reference on that screen is where this information came from. So I'm going to go through some different types of play. And please remember that if you do have a question that you would like to ask at any point in time, you can just go to the chat space and put your question. So solitary play, there's a whole lot of different people, different theorists who have outlined ways that children can play. So these are just 4 of the key things that I'm going to talk about in relation to play. So solitary play is where children are playing by themselves. And if you have a child that is on the autism spectrum, you might find that they much prefer to be by themselves and playing by themselves, and they don't really want to pay attention to what other children are doing. Now, solitary play is something that's important for all children, but it's not the only way to play. Parallel play is where we think about people being parallel to each other. So they're alongside each other, but they're not necessarily engaging in any way with each other. So what happens is you might have children, for example, who are playing there might be blocks, and one child is playing with some blocks and making a road, and another child is playing with some blocks and making a tower, and there's not any interaction between them. Then that's parallel play. Associative play is where children might be playing with the same thing. So for example, a train set, and they might share those things. They might even swap trains, but they're still not really actually having shared goals. So one child's playing with the train over here in the way they want to play with the train, and there's a child over here who's playing with the train. They might swap trains, but they're very much still doing their own kind of thing. Cooperative play is when you actually have children who are working together. So on maybe working towards specific outcomes together, or they might be actually developing rules of the games as they go through together. Now, as I'm explaining those, you might be thinking, for my child, they have a lot of difficulty playing cooperatively with others because if they're not verbal, for example, then are they able to participate in the same way? But what we need to think about is sometimes we're measuring these abilities in different ways because of the children's skills and abilities. So children of determination might move through those stages more slowly than other children, but it might be, one of the reasons might be because their development doesn't allow it. So for example, as I said, if your child isn't verbal, then there might be things that, that make it harder for you to see the social interaction between your child and another child. However, sometimes children can find things difficult because they actually haven't been given the opportunity or been encouraged in a particular way. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later, and maybe some of the tools or strategies that you can use to encourage that. Now, there's lots and lots of different benefits of play. And these benefits, and also the information that is about sorry, looks like that sheet has just gone. Some of the benefits of play are on one of your handouts, which I will talk about at the end. But I just want to talk briefly here about the different benefits that can be achieved through play. So I might leave some of these to talk more deeply about when we refer to the handout at the end, but I'll just give you a little example of each one. So there can be physical benefits to play. So for example, around coordination. Now, if you're thinking my child has a physical disability and it makes it very difficult for them to do that, they may need assistance to do that. So if, for example, there was children who were playing a game with a bat and a ball, your child may not be able to pick up the ball on their own, or they may not be able to hold the bat on their own. But with assistance, they can still hold on to that. So somebody comes around them and holds onto the bat with your child, and then they can have a go at hitting the ball. So they're engaged in the play, but they don't have the physical skills to be able to do that on their own. But there's still those physical benefits. There's a lot of social benefits to play, but if a child doesn't enjoy the social interaction, you can't suddenly expect them to participate with a whole lot of children in a cooperative play experience. So they're going to find that social interaction more difficult. So I'll talk about some things later on about where you might find that social interaction occurring. Emotionally, play, as I said earlier, play is good for our soul. Play is good for helping us to feel to feel happy, to feel included. So we have to remember all of those sorts of things too. Our cognitive is around our thinking. So, for example, through play, children might develop things like problem-solving skills because they need to work out how to do something. Or they might work out through play that if I do this, this is going to happen. So they start to learn about an action and a reaction, or a cause and an effect. So I'll talk a bit more about that as well. Communication, and remember, we're not always just talking about verbal communication. So if your child has difficulty with verbal communication, then they can still be engaged in communication situations with other children that don't rely on verbal communication. And we want children to have the opportunity to be creative. And the creativity can come out in so many different ways. It can come out, I guess we often think about creativity as being from an artistic perspective. But, you know, creativity can come through a whole lot of other things as well. And play allows children to have, maybe to be able to be a bit creative and make some decisions around what they're doing. So understanding how these things can happen for your child are really, really important. So all the way through this presentation, just think about your own child and think, well, how could that happen for my child? Or what could I do that might facilitate that development a little further? So when we're talking about practicing play with children, there's a whole lot of different things that we're going to talk about, but I'm just going to unshare my screen and we're going to play clip 1. Okay, I'll just go back to sharing my screen now. So from that short clip, we can see how some children, just based on the area of determination, it means that they can be excluded. And sometimes it's about us helping other people to understand how your child can play and how to include your child in play. And some of that means that you have to work a little bit harder to be able to do that. Now, as parents of children of determination, you will know that that's probably not something new for you, that sometimes you do have to work harder. And so thinking about how you can look to include all of your children in play is really important. So some of the things that are on the screen that for things for you to think about is making sure that you're a role model. And that can be in so many different ways. So you need to be a role model by showing your child how to play, but you also need to be a role model in how you encourage your child to play so that other children also encourage your child to play. So I'm going to show you some little strategies a little bit later on, some things I've got here to show, so how you might be able to facilitate taking turns with your child during play. So like showing that your child how to be engaged, how to do things that are going to then make them more accepted within the play situation. So the point there, so as I said, if your child has difficulty taking turns, then other children are going to get frustrated because your child always wants to be doing whatever it is, and then other children don't get to have a turn. So then that's going to break down that play situation. So I'll talk a little bit later about some visuals that you might be able to include. In one of my other presentations, I spoke about social stories as well. So if you're not familiar with social stories, it's worth you looking up some of those, because social stories can help your child to learn particular play skills. And this will be particularly relevant for children who are on the autism spectrum, who find that natural, I guess, assimilation of learning more difficult. Focus on the strengths of your child in play. So if you always focus on the things that are more difficult for them, that can be very hard for them, and it can make play very tiring for them. And I'll talk about that again later. But if the example that's listed down there is if your child has difficulty with verbal communication, not setting up games that rely on verbal communication, because straight away what's happening then is your child is being left out. If your child has challenges around their physical ability, and it's a game where you know, you need a level of physical ability to be able to play, then that makes it hard. So you might be able to think of ways you can adapt. So for example, if your child uses a wheelchair and other children are playing running races, then either you or one of your other children can push the wheelchair to allow your other child to participate in those races. But sometimes it's that extra work that is needed to then be able to make sure that the children are included. Build on your child's confidence. So the more that they can be accepted, the more that they can be involved, the more confident they will feel about that. So it means it's sort of a cycle, I guess. So the more confident they are, the more they'll participate. The more they participate, the more confident they become, and it can build into a really nice pattern, rather than feeling maybe excluded and then they become more insecure about being excluded. So even in that short clip, watching the child inside looked very sad and very rejected, and that's not where we want any child to feel. It's also important to think about your child's interests. So this is going to be important for all children. So you wouldn't generally buy toys for any children that the child wasn't interested in, or you wouldn't be encouraging them to play a game that they're not even remotely interested in. So we have to remember that is an important thing for our children of determination as well. Find your child's interests and then encourage your other children to play what your child of determination is interested in. Not always your child of determination having to go with what everybody else is interested in. Now, if your child is on the autism spectrum and has more of a very almost obsessive interest with something, you can use that and then start to try to encourage them into other areas as well. But just saying, for example, you can't play with the train, you need to come and play here. If you've ever tried that before, you might find that your child has had a bit of a meltdown or has become very resistant. So being able to take the train but playing with something else can be a really good stepping stone. So don't expect everything at once. Just start with one thing and then start to move to the next thing so that it's more successful for your child, your child of determination, but also more successful for your other children and less frustrating for them. But also it means that it's gradual stepping stones for you as well, while you're seeing all the interests and strengths that your child has. So when we're thinking about setting up different play areas, we also need to think about remembering that you know your children the best. So you need to think about, what are the things my child has difficulty with? What are the things that are challenging for my child? What are the things that my child likes to do or can excel at? So I've just put a couple of points down here. So for example, if your child has difficulty playing as part of a large group, don't expect them to play as part of a large group. Start off with one child. So if you have 4 children in your family, even that might be too many all at once. So it might be easier for your child of determination to play with one of their siblings and then gradually including another sibling. Your children's personalities will also come into play here. So if you have a child who finds it difficult, say your child of determination is on the autism spectrum and they find it hard to be part of a bigger social situation, but also they don't like loud noises, and one of your other children is very loud, then you need to think about how to help that child understand how they might need to adjust their behaviour and their characteristics as well to make it easier for your child of determination. So it's not always about the child of determination having to change to fit everybody else. It's about other people and other situations also changing to support your child of determination. So I've just put the point there, supporting your child during play, either physically, so that physical assistance I was talking about, say with the bat and the ball. So you're actually physically assisting your child to engage in the play, or it might be providing support with sharing. And I'll show you some visual communication things at the end that might be ways that you can do that. So look at ways of encouraging other children to play with your child of determination. Look at what strategies and what ways can you encourage them. And I'm going to show you some photos shortly of a family that I know and the way that their children all interact together. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen again, and we're going to watch another little clip. And this is about some children of determination.
I am Esther, and this is my ability. I am Aaron, is my ability.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen. But you could see from that, that particular clip that those children being able to participate in things that interest them, being able to participate in things that allow their strengths to come through, they're the things that we need to think about. So that message in that clip about changing the way we see disability or children of determination, and remembering that all children bring different things to our world. And it's not about judging every child on just one set of criteria. And unfortunately for children of determination, that's what sometimes happens. So if they can't do everything other children are doing, then they get left to the side, and that's not okay. Okay, so I'm going to show you some photos now and just explain a few things about these. So I'm introducing Dexter and his family in these particular photos. So Dexter is over here, sorry. Dexter has cerebral palsy, and these are Dexter's two younger sisters. So Dexter's the oldest child in the family. And Dexter has quite complex areas of needs. So Dexter uses a wheelchair. He doesn't use verbal communication. And he also has a vision impairment that makes it difficult for him to see sometimes. So his vision changes. I guess that's the best way to think about it. So when I was going to organise this presentation, I have included examples of Dexter in a number of presentations that I've done, and I met Dexter through a play group a number of years ago when he was only 4. But I thought I would like to ask his mum some things around playing and playing with the other children in the family. And these are some of the quotes that she had. So she said that they will always go to him and they always try their hardest at including him. So he can't necessarily go to them. So at the moment, his wheelchair is, he needs somebody to help him with his wheelchair. So he can't just go to where they are. So you can see in these pictures that this is what his sisters are used to doing. They're used to coming to him and bringing things to him and including him in what they're doing. So I'm not sure exactly what they're doing here. I think they've got little things in containers, but you can see that Dexter has a container on his lap as well, and his sisters are including him in their game. So this is Dexter and his sisters with mum as well, and the mum was saying one of the things that they love all doing together, and you can see how happy Dexter is in this picture, that having sleepovers in Dexter's room have become something that all 3 children like. And you can see in these pictures as well. So Dexter has to have a special bed because of his movement and his, I guess, lack of directed movement. So having sleepovers in his sisters' rooms isn't necessarily possible, but his sisters like having sleepovers in his rooms. So this is something that they like to do together. And you can see them there, you know, in the morning, then they're jumped up and they're on his bed chatting to him and, you know, waking mum and dad up. While Dexter's not verbal, he's actually quite noisy when he wants to. So when he's happy, he's often making lots and lots of different noises that his sisters interpret. So one of the other things that mum said, so they're all cooking here. And she said that one of the things that often helps is Dexter has a standing frame, and you can see him in his standing frame here. So he can't stand up on his own, but it means that sometimes they can stand up to do things then. So it means that he's at the same height as them, so they don't always have to sit down. He can also go in his standing frame. His standing frame's actually good for his therapy as well. So it's kind of, you know, 2 things at the same time. But you can see here that he isn't able to stir that on his own. So you can see that his sister is holding his hand and helping him to stir that. So he's participating. So when we're talking about learning through play and with others, play and friendships are really important because it's actually being engaged with other children that helps us to learn about sharing. It helps us to learn about cooperating, and it helps us to learn about making friends. So if children never have the opportunity to do that, then if they don't have the opportunity to play with other people, then they're probably not going to be able to share. Friends are fun and make us feel included. And if we imagine ourselves that social interaction with other people is very, very important, and it's the same for everybody. It's something that we need to remember to foster with all children. If your child finds it hard to understand and manage emotions, and it affects their ability to play with others, that's where you need to support them in that play. So for example, if you know that your child is on the autism spectrum and finds it really hard to regulate their own emotions, then you might need to participate with your child in those play situations. So it's not about suddenly expecting your child to be able to do that on their own. Remember that if your child isn't verbal, there's lots of different ways to communicate, and making sure that you support other children to understand and start to read your child of determination's communication. So it's not just about everybody having to rely on verbal communication. It's about looking at how can we support other children to understand that language. So in that little clip, that little boy, Riser, who had hearing impairment, so he uses sign language. So then it would be important for the children around him to be taught sign language, because otherwise it's restricting the opportunities that he has to engage socially. So he can't use the same language as everybody else, but everybody else can learn to use his language as well. So even if your child makes different noises, it's about helping other people understand what those noises mean so that they can interpret your child. Sometimes remember that children can demonstrate challenging behaviours that are actually a consequence of their inability to communicate. So nobody understands what they're trying to say, so they can lash out in other ways to try to get people to participate. So if your child doesn't know how to play with other children, they might knock something over that another child is playing with, because that's the only way they know to get the child's attention. So if you can help to support that, then it's going to mean more success. So better communication often means less challenging behaviours. So we already talked about the importance of friendship, and remembering that every friendship doesn't look the same. So if you imagine for yourself, you might have different friends that you do different things with, or you might it's not that you're a different person, but you might act slightly differently with one group of friends than another, and that's okay. And it's important for us to remember that the same thing with children. Your child of determination doesn't have to play exactly the same way to still be included in that friendship group. And getting involved in physical play can be really beneficial to your child's confidence, even if you have to support that physical activity because of your child's needs. So sometimes play can be quite exhausting for children. So don't expect too much from your children too soon. And remember that if, like I said before, if you're always relying on the area that's the most difficult for your child, it's going to be even more exhausting. So focus on balancing that out and having time with other people and time playing on your own, playing with one of their siblings and then on their own, or playing with you or other adults in your house and then with their siblings at a different time. So not always expecting the same, because it can be quite exhausting. Allow your children time away from play situations as well. So if you know, for example, that your child finds it hard to play with other children, make sure they have time to remove themselves from the play and play on their own for a little while and then rejoin. And ensure there's lots of opportunities for things like just nature play. So being able to just be out in the outdoors. And if your child has physical needs that prevent them being able to run and jump, they can still be exploring things in nature. And that sensory component, feeling leaves, touching sand or water, all of those things are really important. But if you can make playing as fun as possible for all of the children involved, it's more likely everyone wants to do it again. So if it's always hard work, either for your child of determination or it's always hard work for your other children, you'll find that nobody really wants to do it. So you want to make it as fun as you possibly can so that everybody's keen to play again. So when you see your child, if your child maybe has difficulty with sharing, when you see your child sharing or taking turns or playing in a way that is a positive way, then give your child praise and encouragement. Tell them what it is that you liked seeing them do, and then encourage them to do it again. But be specific. Don't just say good boy when your child shares, for example. Say, that was very good letting Tom have a turn. So you're being very specific and helping your child to understand what's expected and what is appropriate. So playing with your child is also important. And as I said, it's important to think about that it's not just about other people playing with your child. It's about you playing with your child as well. So in this picture, Dexter and his sisters and his dad, they're playing golf. So it's Dad's turn at the moment, but you can see Dexter also has a golf stick, and so then when it's his turn, then somebody will go over and help him hit the ball. Now, sometimes he may be in his standing frame to do that, so that then he's standing with the rest of the family, or you can see in this particular instance, he's in his wheelchair. But there's, you know, when he was younger, one of his parents might have just held him standing up, but now he's much taller and stronger, then he needs time to just relax in his wheelchair as well. But playing with your child allows you to see the world through their eyes. It also tells children that you value what they're doing. So it's going into things that they're enjoying as well. When parents and siblings play, they learn to communicate more effectively with the child of determination, and they can also provide that setting to be guiding children in a nurturing and positive way. So sometimes less verbal children can't express their views in the same way. So it's important to think about how that's going to happen. But play offers parents and siblings a really wonderful opportunity to engage with their children. And I really like the quote from Dexter's mum here that says, basically, we've always told the girls they have to include Dexter. So it's been a really good thing, because what they do now is they make sure other people include him. So they are always advocating for him as well. So of course they do things on their own. They go and play, the two girls play hockey and Dexter doesn't play hockey. The two girls go and do different things individually as well as together. But it's about remembering that it's not about exclusion. But you can see here too that they also like to do Dexter's hair. So Dexter's got his hair in a ponytail here because they like to do his hair as well. So you can help your child practice skills like sharing, taking turns, listening and being sensitive. Model positive behaviours. So listen, share and compromise as well. Help your child and your other children in the family, help them to understand about compromise. And it's not always about just doing things in a certain way. And playing games that don't rely on physical needs. So a board game, for example, and using visuals. And I'm going to show you some visuals in a second. And I mentioned using social stories as well. So there's a few things that you can do to make playing with others easier. Choose things that your child will enjoy, and you can adapt things. So you can look at if your children need extra grips to be able to hold onto things, or they need extra props. Think about the kinds of things that they need. Set up play areas so they can play together and by themselves, and help children to manage difficult situations. So it's not just about helping your child of determination, it's about helping other children as well, and make sure all children have an opportunity for a variety of play experiences. So there was some other workshops that I did where I spoke about things like sensory needs and supporting participation by using visuals and things. So there is another good video, but we won't have time to watch that. And that's just got the link on this. So when you receive these slides as well, you might like to go and watch that one as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I would like to just show you some of the handouts and also some other visuals that I have here. So I'll just stop sharing this screen, and sorry, I just need to make sure bring up my other PowerPoint handouts, and hopefully I will see if we can see these. So I'm hoping that you can see this. So I'm not sure if one of the other facilitators would like to just mention if you can see the handout on the screen at the moment. Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so this is one of the handouts that I was mentioning that has some of the things that I've spoken about in here about adapting play. And remember, think about how you can always adapt play situations. This was stuff I spoke about around practicing play with your children of determination, and also setting up play areas and the pressure of play that I spoke about. So that's just on one of the handouts. This handout here has the importance of play. So the things that I spoke about, and I mentioned the different types of play here. And then I also talked to you about developmental benefits of play. So I gave you very brief examples of some of these things, but you can see on this handout, there's some more information about different things within the areas of development that I spoke about. So remember that if your child has a physical disability and they find physical skills very, very difficult, some of these things they might not be able to learn through play. So for example, balance. So I actually have a hearing impairment, so I'm deaf in one of my ears, which doesn't make a lot of difference to my life because my other ear works fine, but it makes a significant difference to my balance. So it doesn't matter how hard I try, there's some things around balance that I won't be able to do because my the difference between my hearing on one side and another actually prevents that. So it's making sure that I don't have to rely on balance all the time for different things. So you can't expect children to learn things that maybe their area of determination is going to prevent, but it's about looking at how you can balance some of those things. So I talked about each of these different areas and things that you might be able to help your child to learn through different play opportunities. So remember that these aren't just restricted to the child of determination. These are about ensuring that all children learn this. So practicing and building empathy is not just for your child of determination, it's for your other children to understand empathy and make them realise that sometimes it's about them changing to adapt to be able to include other people. So that's just on one of the other handouts, and remembering to help other children understand how your child communicates, because that's going to make it easier for them. And the last handout that I just want to talk about before I show you some visual things is this one just has a whole lot of different web addresses that you can find out. So there's some very practical strategies, some that are specific around autism spectrum disorder, some of the reasons. This one talks about the reasons why it's important for children with disabilities to play. And as I said, you know, please don't be concerned about the terminology around disability, because that's the terminology that we use in a very respectful way. This is interesting as well, that sometimes this can talk about how your child of determination might have difficulty with play based on their area of support needs. So this one here you can see is not terminology that we generally use, but the article itself is good about how to support children through play. So there are different handouts that might be useful for you. So I'm just going to show you a couple of other things. Please, if you have a question and you would like to put it in the chat space, that would be great. So I'm just going to move on now to our question time. So if anyone does have a question, please put it in the chat space, or please feel free to ask out loud. But I just want to show you a couple of other things that might be useful in Play with Children. So I'm hoping that, sorry, there's a bit of a glare on here. This is just a good with a thumbs up. So using visual communication to support children, if your child finds it difficult to just understand your verbal language, you might need to use some visuals to support. So something like good, or, and these are symbols that we use, but if you use different ones, then obviously you make cards that are useful for your child. So this one here says more. So we use more, like I'm right-handed, so I'd use my right hand. So you go like this, more. So if this could be used for, would you like to have more bubbles, more playing time? And then of course, sometimes you might need to use something like stop. Now, one of the things around using visuals is that when you say a spoken word, it lasts very momentarily. So when you say stop, it's come and gone. Whereas if you could say stop and hold your hand in a stop symbol, then it means that they can see this. So if they miss the word, they can still see the symbol. But if you actually have visuals as well and you say stop, and you've got all of these, then your child is getting more of a message. So you can do that with any of these kinds. And these are just some examples. So, you know, you can use things like wait, so waiting, but this will depend on your particular child and what might work for them. The other thing is around taking turns, and I did show in one of the other workshops I did around visuals, this kind of sign here, and I'll just hold that, hopefully you can see where it says first and then. So if you want your child to do something first and then there's an activity of preference, then you can get them to do something first and then. So you do this by just putting the picture on here just with some Velcro and then removing it. This other one here, and I'm just going to use this one to show you the example. But here, this can be used for turn taking. So I've just got two pictures here, and you can see I've written the word mum and written Ben here, if this boy's name's Ben. And so on here, you can see that the arrow is pointing to Ben. So it's Ben's turn. But then if it's not Ben's turn now and it's mum's turn, then you can point the arrow to mum so that then they know, well, now it's mum's turn. You can also use this by putting I just didn't have one with me at home, a pin in the middle, and you might have a photo of another child up here. So if you have 3 children, you might have your other child's photos here and here, and then you might have this as a with a pin in it, or you just turn it around. So now it's this child's turn, now it's mum's turn, now it's, you know, this child's turn. So you can do this with have lots of different pictures. If your child, though, finds this quite difficult, just using an arrow, then you can even just do it in the way that if we just imagine that now there's no, we're just going to have this as our picture, and we don't need to have Ben's name here. So we're just going to have this with the child, and then we go, okay, so Ben, it's your turn. When Ben's turn's finished, we're just going to remove Ben off there. And now it's going to, whose turn is it next? Let's have a look. Now it's, whose turn is it? It's mum's turn. So you can have pictures, and if you have these with Velcro, these ones are actually just stuck, so that's why it's a little bit more time consuming. But if you just have them with a little piece of Velcro on the back, then you can just quickly take them off and put the next child's turn on. So if you were playing a game, you can use turns like this. Or you can just visually tell people that it's this person's turn, and now it's this person's turn, and now it's this person's turn. So using visuals can assist children in understanding things that might then support them in their play as well. So is there anybody who has any particular questions? You know, maybe you have a question about your own child that you think I might be able to answer. Please feel free to put the question in the chat space, or if you would like to ask the question, please go ahead. Or if you have something you'd like me to go over and explain a little bit more, then we've still got 5 minutes in which I can do that. So does anybody have any particular questions? Everyone seems very quiet in these presentations and no one wants to ask a specific question. So one of the things that the organisers did explain to me is that if you do have a question that follows this presentation, or if you've been in any of my other presentations and you have questions that arise, maybe you didn't have a question at the time, but now you've watched a few presentations and there's some question that has arisen for you. Please contact the organisers and they will then send the question through to me, and then I can respond to the question for you. So if you, you might have a particular situation in your household, for example, where you have a child of determination that is 6 years of age, and you have a child that is 14 years of age, and you have a 1-year-old child, and you want some ideas of how you can actually incorporate such a varied age range as well as ability range within all of your children. So that would be something that maybe then I could support you with an answer. So please, if you do have individual questions, just ask the conference organisers and they can send them through to me, because it appears that everybody's quiet and no one has a specific question. And I can just see the sunshine coming through my window now, which is creating a lovely little headband of light on for me right now, because it's the afternoon here, quite late in our afternoon, so our sun is just going down, whereas I know that it's not the afternoon for you. So does anybody have any questions before we finish this afternoon? I'd like to thank you so much for your participation in these workshops, and I hope that there has been something that's been useful for you and will help you to support your child of determination and also to support other children within your family. So thank you very much for having me. Goodbye.